presentation on basically responses to natural disasters. And basically my relation to that subject is, again, on Hurricane Matthew, as mentioned earlier, that also hit the United States, and part of the United States that it hit was in North Carolina. And I have family out in North Carolina, so naturally I was very worried about, you know, their well-being and property, just their way of life out there. And I got to experience it a lot through social media and my family's posts about their experience with the hurricane. So I kind of blocked the stuff out for confidentiality and stuff, but some main things definitely touched on the devastation. My person was supposed to be having a business meeting, and the business she was going to go to, you had to take a boat to get to it because, you know, the whole parking lot was flooded. I couldn't believe that she was actually going to the business meeting still. I just highlighted some main points. And also they are from a more upper class perspective, so I thought an interesting thing was that she had 2 hotels like prepared that she could go to depending on the severity of the hurricane, whether it hit in certain areas. And I think that's a privilege that not a lot of people would have, to even have a place to go to, let alone 2 different options. Just some other things, like her daughter was enjoying their hurricane party, or her main concern over the experience was how she was going to lose weight from eating all the junk food that they were eating. So while their town did experience devastation, it was touched on again, only around 50 lives were lost in the United States versus in other countries. It was a lot more significant, which allows people to have kind of this joking aspect to natural disasters that can be very deadly and harmful for other people. So that kind of touches on the idea, again, of accessibility to safety, and the idea of who can afford to be safe, as well as who has the opportunity. A quote from one of my sources that I found was, in natural disasters, the most vulnerable people are often the ones who are forced to move, either because they live in marginal low-lying or steep slope areas with greater exposure to hazards, or they live in poor quality housing and therefore are subject to greater losses. This touches on, again, the idea of the poor may be placed in areas that they can't necessarily escape from, as well as they just might not have money. Like when you're moving locations, like from house to house, like a house further away from the problem, it's a lot more affordable than, say, a country where like the storm was gonna hit them very hard, and regardless of if you moved to this house or that house, they were still gonna be very affected. So it is a lot more expensive to travel internationally to a different country to be able to have like very secure setting that you don't have to worry about it. Okay. And this touches on the beyond the U.S. concept. I decided to focus on Haiti because, again, Haiti was very influenced by the hurricane. Around 1,000 lives were lost, and a lot of this hits on, I just want to make sure I didn't skip one, that idea of who is able to evacuate in times of need. And with the focus on Haiti, the country was already very poor and impoverished, and one of my sources definitely made sure to highlight that it wasn't just their natural disasters. Like, they've had very severe earthquakes that were so devastating. I think that was back in 2010, that like an incredible amount of lives were lost. And this quote up there saying that Haiti's vulnerability to natural disasters, its food shortages, poverty, deforestation, and lack of infrastructure are not accidental. To say that it is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere is to miss the point. Haiti is complained was made poor by France, the United States, Great Britain, and other Western powers, and by the IMF and World Bank. Okay, and this hits on the historical content because Haiti was very much a colonized country, especially by the French. Oh, I skipped one, sorry. I'm trying to click too many times. So in 1804, the Haitian people achieved their freedom from the French, but they had to basically pay for that freedom in reparations. And in order to pay France, they had to borrow money from other countries. And the biggest contributors were definitely the United States and Germany. And because they were so indebted to the United States, you know, the United States, they want their money back. So they sent troops and people into Haiti to make sure that they're going to be able to get their money back. Haiti does eventually repay them after World War II, but the U.S. still remains in their country, and they very much control a lot of aspects of their society. Just a couple examples of specific things that are controlled are the World Bank and the IMF. So, you know, when you're having these terrible natural disasters occur, it's, you know, what are you going to do? Like, if you don't have the money or resources available, you know, you have to reach out from somewhere. And they had to reach out to these large banks, and the banks would only help them if they agreed to let them liberalize their country, and that's very detrimental and like a risky thing to do when your country like isn't strong, established. They don't have like infrastructure of their own that is already set up. So just like a very specific example was Haiti was forced to open their market to like the global situation, and U.S. rice was sold in Haiti instead of them developing and maintaining their own agricultural industry. So it's strengthening relations with the United States. And to like challenge resistance, it's been really hard because again, it's a very impoverished country, but especially in legislation, there's been a lot of challenges because a lot of the companies that you donate to, they're corrupting the money and they're not spending it how they should, or when it gets to Haiti or other countries, their government is using it in ways that it is not intended to be. So one is challenges against the FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That's just one of the legislations that's supposed to help prevent the corruption, but it's just too broad and it's still allowing for a lot of the corruption to occur. And again, it's hard to resist because Haiti is very dependent. As for praxis and my positionality, definitely as a student, that affected, I think, most heavily my view of it, but it's to spread knowledge and awareness. You have to know like where you're donating to and be careful. I listed just a few that are really good specifically for Haiti to donate to, such as Food for the Poor, American Red Cross, World Vision, UNICEF, Save the Children, or Mercy Corps. And again, with the legislation, it's very important to pay attention to what you vote on. You know, I'm not exactly sure what, as far as policies on international affairs we're going to be voting on this presidential election, because there's a lot of different things we might not necessarily be voting on at this time, but eventually like legislation is going to come around, or we need to go about bringing it up, you know, like making the legislation exist. And yeah, that's my presentation.